combination of hard work, guidance from music educators, and parents with music backgrounds helped to plant the seed that would grow in John Landis. Please join us as he takes us on his journey. Professional trumpet player John Landis is next on OTP.
Well, welcome aboard on OTP, John. Thanks so much. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
We are doing well. Appreciate you taking time out of your life to come aboard and chat about music, a love for all of us, for sure.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let's dive right in and first talk about where are you from. Let's get to know you and what do you play? What's happened?
So I was born in Washington Courthouse, Ohio, which is sort of in between Columbus and Cincinnati. And not long after that, my family relocated to Marysville, Ohio, which is northwest of Columbus by about a half hour. And I played trumpet in the Navy bands.
Super. Okay, so take us from the beginning. I mean, were you born and just started playing trumpet? How did it start?
Yeah, definitely not. No, I didn't play any musical instruments until middle school band. It was sixth grade band was where I got started.
Okay.
And, my parents were music lovers. My dad plays electric bass. They're not professional musicians, but huge music lovers. They love going to live music. They love checking out local bands. They always had music on in the house. Mom played clarinet in high school band, so she could read music. And so she knew a little bit about the fundamentals of music. And I can recall her sitting me down a few times when I was young to try and explain the stuff that definitely went over my head at the time, but was helpful because it planted those seeds. And yeah, it was sixth grade band where they asked what we wanted to play. And I can recall going to the music store, trying to pick out an instrument. And I said, I want to play the trumpet. And I could not make a sound on a trumpet mouthpiece. They gave it to me and I tried to buzz it several times. It didn't work. He was like, well, here, try a trombone mouthpiece. And I tried the trombone mouthpiece and I could make a sound on that. But I had heard this CD of the Ohio State Marching Band back in the day. My friend, he had this, maybe it was even a tape, but anyway, they had a track on there where they broke down the fight song. So you heard the track and then you heard, all right, now here we layer it up with the tuba, boom, 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 boom. And then they add the middle voices. And then finally, I remember the feeling and the sound of completion, like, oh, it sounds like the tune when the trumpet comes in, because the trumpet has the melody. And of course, hearing, like Star Wars and, movie music and stuff with huge trumpet themes, it just, I don't know, it made trumpet get into the membrane up there somehow. So that's what I was decided on. So even though I couldn't make a sound on that trombone mouthpiece, I was like, no, I want to play the trumpet.
You took my next question. I always often ask on these shows that the sound, and you talked about the mouthpiece and not getting a sound or air out of it or vibrations. Did that discourage you a little bit? I mean, the point that I'm trying to make is it's not easy to start on a trumpet. Did it turn you around a little bit at all?
No, I can remember my mom could make a sound on the trumpet before I could. So we got it from the store. She was luckily on my side and we came home with the trumpet. And I remember she must have been trying to help me out so she could make a sound on it. And she was probably trying to, but I think it was just, I didn't have that like private instruction. So, you look at a tube with metal plumbing and mouthpiece and you just intuitively, you want to or do something really, I don't know, violent or too compressed or something. And it took a little bit for me to figure out how to make the thing work.
Right. I want to stay there for a minute because now you're in middle school. Who was your band director? You remember your middle school band director?
Oh, yeah. His name's Joe Galvin. He's retired from the program now, but I recall him as being a really warm, friendly, encouraging guy, like someone who he ran a tight ship, but he did it with humor. He did it with a soft touch. And I wouldn't say he played or demonstrated all the time, but every time he did, he was a French horn player by trade. And he just made a beautiful sound every time you heard him. And he just seemed to encourage everyone all the time. It was all, I just remember a really positive and nurturing experience with him.
That's so important, isn't it? Especially at that young age to have someone to cultivate and let the seed grow at a young age.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're playing in middle school, and did you feel? I mean, I know it's kind of difficult to go back into the memory, but before we move on, I'm just curious, did you feel like, I think I'm pretty good at this? Or did you think, hey, I better pick something else?
I don't think I thought of it either one of those ways. To
Okay.
me at the time, I wasn't taking it super seriously. I knew I wanted to play the trumpet of all the instruments, but I wasn't dead set at that age at, oh, I'm going to be a musician. This is
Right.
absolutely what I do. To me, trumpet was just another thing you did, like you threw football out in the yard. And so I can remember kids in middle school who they knew how to put the third vowel D out to make the D in tune. And I was like,
Right.
I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what that is. Wow, that guy really knows what's going on.
Right,
At
right,
least
right.
in sixth grade. And I definitely wasn't like the top of the section or anything like that. I was just kind
Right.
of having fun. There was one experience that I do remember, which is we were reading through Good King Wenceslas,
Yeah.
and then we were playing through it, and I think he might have even been isolating the trumpet section, and then
Right.
everyone kind of peeled off one by one, and I was the only one left playing through the melody. And so I guess maybe that experience, I sort of thought, oh, hey, I kind of know what I'm doing here a little
Yeah,
bit. But
yeah, yeah.
it definitely wasn't ordained at some super young age,
Right.
like, oh my gosh, he's such a natural. Oh, he knows exactly what he's doing here. Because I felt like I was surrounded by people who, had a
Yeah,
lot more impressive stuff going on.
right. Do you know if any of your colleagues back then have gone on to play trumpet like you in your life, or you lost
Ooh,
touch?
I don't know about trumpet. Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely, as far as I'm aware, there aren't any brass players, at least from around that time. There were some people from before that time that went through that program, like the high school band director in Marysville, Ohio. Now he went through that program.
Uh,
Um, there's some folks who have gone on to some university teaching, like several of my private teachers who I met later on, like in high school, they had gone through Marysville High School and even to
right.
my undergrad. But yeah, as far as I can remember, I don't think there's any other like working musicians that came at least out of the program at that time.
Right. 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 Yeah. So now you go on to high school, and what is in your mind? You think you're getting better? Are you taking lessons?
So yeah, maybe in like seventh or eighth grade, I started to, I guess, emerge a little bit more naturally as a player. And I would get first chair, but almost just on accident. I wasn't really trying. It was sort of natural. And then by the time I got to high school, I noticed that there were some more serious players. There were people who were more into it. Obviously, I'm with seniors and people who have been playing for more years than I have, and they're taking it seriously. And we had concert band auditions. We would do marching band in the fall, obviously, and then we'd go to concert band after the season was over, and they would do tape auditions where you would go into a practice room. You'd have to record like an audition excerpt, basically.
Sure.
And I think they had this lick from bumpy, I can't remember which Sousa march that is off the top of my head, but that was
Uh,
it. And that just seemed like crazy fast to me at the time. Like, how could anyone possibly? And a friend of mine, who was same year in high school, his dad played trumpet. He went to Ohio State as a trumpet player, and he was really into solo classical trumpet, but he was also really into like Bill Chase. And
oh
so he
yeah,
was into that kind of music. And
yeah,
so he had a dad who was a really good trumpet player, and we weren't really friends at the time, but he kind of pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, my dad kind of showed me how to play this. If you want, I could show you how to play it." I was like, sure. I hadn't been practicing it that much. I hadn't thought about it. And so he kind of took me through it, and that helped a lot. So I think he got maybe like third chair, and maybe I got fifth or sixth chair or something like that.
right,
Um, and so yeah, I was starting to apply myself a little bit in that freshman year, but I could tell that, oh, I'm definitely not like top of the heap. There's better players
right.
here.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, it wasn't until my sophomore year that I started taking lessons because my band director, um, he knew a trumpet player who had gone through Marysville High School. He went
Mm,
on to Ohio Wesleyan, which is where I eventually went on to do my undergrad. And he was back in a Columbus area, and he was teaching private lessons because he had returned to Ohio State to do his doctoral studies. And so he
mm,
came by the band room, and I guess he dropped off his card or a flyer or something like that, looking for students. And so my band director was like, "Hey, you should seriously take some private lessons." So in my sophomore year, I think I started those in earnest with a guy named Mark Wade, who was a great player. He seemed like he could play a double C. He could
mm.
play cornet solos with like fabulous double tonguing, triple tonguing technique. he made a great sound, and probably most importantly for me at the time, he just had a way of keeping it fun and motivating and
Right.
interesting. And he just had sort of like a goofy sense of humor and like a fun personality that made it like it was never like it was never a super hard thing, which I like teachers who are really hard now and later on in life, but at the time, I don't think that would have worked. At least I don't. It's hard to tell, so many years on. But I think that
Sure.
nurturing touch really kept me going with it.
Yes. You touched upon just that kind of element of having the feeling to, as a teacher, to grow that spirit. And they had that tool to really um, instill with you, okay, you're getting better, you're moving. And this is you brought back a memory of, I've had students that it wasn't, they weren't going to practice 8 hours a day, but it was something that they enjoyed doing, music. And that's so important for us to, because that's why we do it. We want to get paid, but you enjoy playing. Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
great. So you took lessons. Talk a little bit about your experience with your teachers there, and what type of music you said in the marching band in high school. Um, Give us a little bit of an idea of what was happening on the field and what you were doing there.
Yeah. So my high school band directors were Bill Thyssen was the main director. He's just recently retired as of a few years ago from Marysville. Rob Hildreth
Mm,
and Brian Ash,
mm,
and they were wonderful. They ran a sort of core style marching band.
okay.
They
Yeah.
Thyssen and Hildreth had both gone to Ohio State. And so,
Right.
just like everyone in the Columbus area, everyone kind of bleeds scarlet and gray. And so we would
Right.
do Script Ohio, and our fight song was the Ohio State fight song. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of overlap with that culture being just a half hour
Sure.
outside of Columbus. But we did,
Absolutely.
my freshman year, we had a really big, well, a pretty big marching band. I think it was north of 200 members, might have even
Oh,
been
that's
250.
good.
I can't really remember, but and I remember us doing Buddy Rich, Channel One Suite, and Big Noise from Winnetka. It was like this big swing show. We had this really good drummer who was a senior at the time. And so they sort of made like a drum set, front of the field drum set feature for him. And I thought it was so cool. And I remember the thrilling challenge of having to memorize the music for the first time. I hadn't had to do that before. So that was a fun new challenge, I remember. And I march parades now, and I think, how did I ever enjoy doing this? Because it's such hard work, cardio wise now. But
Well,
at the
you're
time,
old, man.
yeah, I know it. But at the time, yeah, I was having
Yeah.
a lot of fun. It was a great time. I had fun traveling around to the different high schools, feeling like we're
Yeah.
strutting our stuff. We're kind of showing them what
Yeah.
it's all about.
Right.
Um, and then I had a friend who was a sax player. He played alto mostly, and my band director also, he was a drum set player, but he also played a little saxophone on the side. So he took sort of a special interest in him, and he exposed him to like Take Five. He had him learn that. He gave him the sheet music for that. And so between
Right.
him listening, that got me listening to a lot of Dave Brubeck,
Yeah.
and the band director, he also exposed me, I'd say, to Maynard Ferguson, and
Right.
a lot of through the jazz band program that they did after school. We heard, yeah, Maynard, we heard Dizzy Gillespie, we heard
Right.
Miles Davis stuff, we
Sure.
heard Bill Watrous, we heard, yeah, it was a lot of stuff. There was like a lot of foot in like that sort of rock jazz fusion world. We
Yeah.
did some Weather Report.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
did, maybe some jazz band versions of Papa Was a Rolling Stone. It wasn't
Right.
just the like Kendor Classics jazz band
Yeah.
arrangement of, whatever publisher cooked
Right.
up or something. And it was,
Yeah.
we were playing, it wasn't like the originals, but we were playing the music and we were listening to the
Right.
music, and, we were being exposed to that. And so, yeah, I definitely started that love of listening to Dave Brubeck, Paul Desmond and all that, and Maynard at that time.
So much of our learning goes on as human beings without us even knowing we're learning. I can hear you talking, and your ear, I would imagine, obviously, because you're playing as a professional now, your ear was being tuned at that time, and you probably didn't even know it, as your instructors were giving you this music, and you fell in love with it, you took it and ran with it.
Yeah, that's right. Even when I was going through my undergrad in music ed, you're only exposed to what you're exposed to. You don't know what you don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that until I got some other experience. Oh, wow, we had great band facilities. Oh, wow, we had a good library of tunes. Wow, we had really nice looking instruments, and we had,
Yeah.
I didn't realize how it was. Now, we weren't like the creme de la creme, I don't think. Like, we didn't have an orchestra program in Marysville. As far as I know, they still don't have one. Um,
Right.
so there were definitely schools that were nearby that probably had more fleshed out, but what they were able to do with what they had was really impressive. And
That's
now that I've gone around and we go with the band now into schools all the time, and you see stuff
right.
and you're like, wow, oh, we really had it kind of nice back
Yeah.
there. I wish I had known that, because I could have appreciated it more then, and taken more advantage of it, because you're just going through school, your family lives where they live, and you go through the thing and
Yeah.
you don't really think too much about it. And then it's later when you're reflecting, you're like, wow, we really had some good stuff. And then
Yeah.
the teacher's exposing you to these things, you don't realize, oh, that planted a seed that's going to grow into a giant
Yeah.
tree later on.
Yes. Yeah. Let's talk about that seed. So, do you remember in high school at some point, and we all have gone through this, at this is where you're thinking about, okay, my next step? Were you thinking this is something I may want to major in college, or did somebody approach you? What was that about?
Yeah, to me, I would say it was all sort of organic and natural. It wasn't too premeditated. It was something that seemed like, oh, I seem to be getting a lot of signs from the universe that this is something that maybe I should be doing. And I can recall being very tortured in my senior year about, oh, well, I could be an architect, I could be a psychiatrist, I could be a doctor, I could,
Get a
and
real
feeling
job,
like, oh,
kid.
I've got to pick now. Yeah, I remember thinking like, "Oh my gosh, like this just seems so daunting. How do you choose just one thing?" And it probably was just talking with friends and teachers and my parents, just sort of being like, "Well, you sort of have this natural thing with music going on. You're doing a lot of things with the music. People seem to be recognizing you in this way. So maybe that's something that you should look into." And my parents had always made it a big point, like, oh, you're going to go to college, you should go to college. But we didn't have like a giant nest egg saved up for it. It
Right.
was always something that was there in their teaching, but I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know anything about the money of it. I didn't know.
Right.
I was just so green when it came to understanding anything about this.
Right.
And I didn't have a lot of people in my family who had gone to school before, who
Yeah.
could explain that, who knew what that process looked like.
Yeah.
And so when it came time to move on from high school and look at what am I going to do in college, my private teacher, I had taken private lessons with him my sophomore and junior year, and he had this plan. I don't know if he talked to my mom and they worked this out on their own, but he was like a GM of like a franchise. He just set it up really well. He was like, all right, you're going to study with me for 2 years, and then I'm going to pass you off to the teacher at Ohio Wesleyan University, where he had gone for his undergrad. He still had a
Yeah.
close personal connection with him. And he's like, you're going to study with him your senior year. And he must have known that that would set me up really well for being able to go to that school. And
Right.
so I can recall in my senior year of high school having my first lesson with him. His name's Larry Griffin.
Right.
And we played through the lesson. I think my mom might have even been sitting in on it, and he just kind of laid it out. He was like, all right, so I think we can do this amount of scholarship and we can do this kind of thing. And
Wow.
we can make this really nice for you to come here. I mean, and for how green and inexperienced I was and
Yeah.
how little I knew about it, it might as well have been like a hand coming out of the clouds giving me money or a path, like saying, you will do
Ordained.
this, you should do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I had no clue for as little as I had. It wasn't that I hadn't thought about it a lot, but I was green. I didn't know how it worked. I had a
Yeah.
sense that my studies would be really important. And I did really buckle down in my like last, probably halfway through my junior, or no, I would say maybe my junior and senior year, I really buckled down. I was always a sort of a naturally good student.
Right.
But I had one teacher in particular. It was actually a biology teacher who every day in the middle of the week, he would do what he would call a wisdom day. and we wouldn't talk about biology. It would be like life lessons. And he,
Hey, cool.
I can recall him just doing stuff like, I will act now, I will not delay. Like he just had these super
Cool.
motivational things that just, I don't know, for
Yeah.
whatever reason, got into the brain and got me into gear. And I started taking
Yeah.
my studies more seriously, which I think was important for going to Ohio Wesleyan, because that was a big part of who they let into the program. It's like, you can get accepted to the music program, but if your grades aren't good enough to get into the
Right.
university, then you'd have a roadblock there.
Hit
So
the road, Jack.
yeah, it all kind of worked out in a very organic way. And I wish I could say that I had planned it and I was so deliberate about it, but it was really organic. It just seemed like, well, maybe I should do this. And then it kind of worked out that way.
I don't want to leave on or move on without giving props to your mom and dad. They were musical people. They are musical people. And how much of that do you think got into your osmosis, into your brain? Did you, or like you said, I mean, I understand we're kids. I had no clue what I was doing from leaving high school and into college, and my folks, my dad was a drummer, but he wasn't there to help me along with this whole scheme. So your folks were there. They had to really be able to sort of cultivate that with you as well, huh?
Absolutely. My dad, he played in some local like rock bands, I think in Columbus. And so sometimes
Yeah.
they would have rehearsals out in our garage in Marysville. And, maybe my mom would take me out there just to watch them for a little bit, watch them
Right.
jam and stuff. And so there was nothing said. There was nothing really overt about what they were doing. It wasn't like, see this is important, or like, this is really a big deal. But it just, it made an impression. I thought, well, my parents
Yeah.
love music. My dad, like I said, he always had music on in the house and a wide variety of
Yeah.
it. And then by the time I was taking private lessons, I'm sure it was a serious financial investment for them to do that.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
can't remember what they were paying for those lessons at the
Sure.
time, but I think I was going once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks. And
Right.
so because it was an investment, I know my mom really leaned on me to like, you need to take this seriously. You really need to
Right.
be committed about this, because we're not going to do this unless you're really taking it serious. And I can recall her, uh, like my teacher would say like, oh, you should, buzz your mouthpiece. You can, get a lot of progress from
Right.
buzzing your mouthpiece. And then she would hear me doing it at home. She's like, no, that's not practicing the trumpet. You have to play the trumpet. Like there's no mouthpiece buzzing. But they definitely they're very supportive, and I'm very lucky for that. And I felt that even more so as I go on in years, because by the time you go through school and you're looking later at getting jobs and whatnot, if you maybe come from a situation where your folks are just like, okay, where's that job at? What are you doing? They might have a little harder touch when it comes
Right.
to making you consider, getting out of music. And my parents have always
Right.
been supportive of every musical thing I've
That's
done. I
great.
think they've
That's great.
seen the journey that it's provided for me, and where it's been able
Yes.
to take me. So they've just been really fully
Yeah.
supportive the whole time. They've never one time said like, well, maybe you should think about something else, or maybe you
Yeah.
gotta not do this. Yeah, they've been very cool about it the whole time.
Get a real job.
Yeah, exactly.
do, do you have children?
No kids.
Because that's what parents do and are supposed to do, and support and direct, and that is just great. So now you're in college,
Mhm.
and tell us about that whole atmosphere there. What college did you go to, and how did you feel? Were you up to the task with the other trumpet players?
I went to Ohio Wesleyan University. I actually commuted all 4 years. It was 20 minutes down the road. So it's in Delaware,
Wow,
Ohio, which is
that's
north of
cool.
Columbus. And
Yeah,
yeah, it was just purely a financial consideration. It was, oh
sure.
geez, that room and board is really
Yeah,
expensive. And I had a good scholarship for going there, and it was an expensive
right,
school, but the scholarship made it affordable to go to. But the
right.
room and board was still such that we thought, okay, it would be a good idea for me to just commute to school. And it was close enough that it was easy to do, just like going to work every day or something.
Yeah,
Um, I can recall being so enamored with my professor at the time, because he could play high note stuff like Maynard. I never met anyone who could do that,
wow.
and that just seemed like from another me at the time. And so I just was like fully on board this train of like, man, I'm going to study with this guy, and he's going to help me figure out all the secrets to how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
When I matriculated there, though, the studio was pretty strong, and I definitely was at the bottom of that. I wasn't like this natural superstar player when I first got there. There were really great players there, um, and that lasted, I would say, probably until maybe my junior senior year, and then it sort of went into, like, I could sense that, okay, it's a small liberal arts school, which is what it is, um, and the music program wasn't very big. Like, we didn't have a orchestra program. We had a chamber orchestra, which was sort of light string fare. We didn't do your Mahler and your Strauss and your stuff like that. And I didn't do orchestra in high school, so I didn't have a lot of exposure to that sort of stuff, outside of recordings and listening on radio and CDs and stuff. Um, so it was a time of where I started out probably at the bottom of the pile, and then just sort of naturally, my senior year, I could feel like, okay, I feel sort of like a big fish in a small pond. There were
Right.
good players there,
Yeah,
and talented music teachers who have come out of that school, and players, from
sure.
maybe previous generations and whatnot. But yeah, it was definitely a transformative time of going from one end of the experience to the other end of the experience.
Yes. And you went into performance, is that correct?
No, no, I did music education. I think I
Oh,
wanted to do performance. It's hard to
mm,
remember how this all went down at the time, but I can recall
yeah,
thinking I want to do performance, and I think that my professor had said, "Well, we don't do scholarships for performance at the moment. We only do scholarships for education." And being, not we didn't have this giant nest egg for college and whatnot, so we thought,
right.
"I'll take the scholarship for the music education. Thank you very much."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I didn't apply to any other schools. I didn't again, I look back and that it sounds insane, especially compared to some of my colleagues and peers who have gone through music
right.
school, and they auditioned 5 different schools and they got into all of them and they had competitive scholarship offer. To me, that's just not how it happened. I wasn't aware enough, or I just wasn't hip enough to how it all
Right,
worked, that it just really naturally worked out this way, which I'm very grateful, because I don't think I didn't have the playing skills at the time to really swing it or cut it anywhere else. It was a nurturing environment where I
right,
could really work on myself, work on my playing. I had a teacher who was used to working with students in my,
right,
um, niche, or my
yeah, yeah,
sort of slot pecking order, I guess. And
right.
so I felt like he did a good job kind of getting the most out of me at that time of where I was in my playing.
Yes, you're bringing back so many memories for me because, unlike you, my dad had passed away. My mom went into a nursing home, and I applied to, I think it was either, yeah, 14 schools. And I got into about 6 of them. And my grades weren't all
Mhm.
that great. But I was able to go to Grambling State University. I'm originally from Boston. And
Hmm.
and I was not. Uh, in fact, I was a drummer at the time. I was a drum major. And so my point is
Oh,
that
wow.
we had good instruction with people, students that need to practice a lot. And you did that. You sunk your teeth into it. And when was it that you decided that you wanted to go to grad school into music? Because and I got to ask this first. I mean, you're in music education. You graduate with a music education degree. Did you think, okay, I'm going to go and do band directing and start my life?
Yeah, I went through the music ed program, and we every year we would go into schools. So it wasn't like
Yeah,
just your senior year you had student teaching. Every year we had,
right,
through our methods courses, we would go into the local schools and work with the students. I always had a great time doing that. And
right.
so I think I started believing, like, oh, I'm going to be a music teacher. This is what I'm going to do. And I had an idea that I would want to maybe teach high school band, or I'd want to be a college band director, because
Yeah,
I always have enjoyed the private lesson experience. I just enjoy that apprenticeship model. I enjoy sitting down with a person who is
sure.
helping you get the most out of yourself in a one-on-one way. That's just always been something that appealed to me. So I thought, either high school band director or college trumpet teacher would be something I would really be into, that would appeal to me. And I was going through the program, and having wonderful experiences and getting good grades. Again, it was all sort of organic. I feel like I'm having this really great time, and then I go into student teaching and I don't have a great time doing student teaching, which I think it was just all starting to reveal itself as uh and it had nothing to do with the students, I have to say.
Yeah, yeah,
I had some I had asked, of course, because I wanted to do college and high school. They say, well, where do you want to be placed? And I was like, well, the highest you can get me, high school. And they're like, well,
right.
no, you're going to be placed at an elementary school for general music, and you're going to be placed in a middle school band. I was like, oh, geez, I don't. And I can recall that I met with them both before I embarked on the student teaching. The middle school director said, I'm pretty mama bearish with my podium, so you might have a hard time getting your hours from me because, you had to get a certain number
Yeah,
of student
yeah,
teaching hours to pass through.
right.
And so I thought, oh my gosh, I better, I was doing the elementary school placement first. I thought I better front load that.
Yeah.
And so I put more time there. And, I would say I had a really great experience working with the students, but I could see from the environment that I
Okay.
don't think these didn't seem like my people. They didn't seem like
Yeah.
this is the thing that
You
motivated me.
weren't
And I think,
feeling it.
yeah, it seemed like, I had a sense about it going in, like I wanted to do
Right.
more high school, college stuff anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and then I actually ironically had a great time at the middle school placement, not expecting to, but I did have a really good time there. And yeah, I did. I was applying to music teaching jobs when I got out, and
Okay.
I don't know if it was the economy. I don't know if Ohio's just really competitive, but I
Mm.
graduated in 2010 with my undergrad, and I was applying to a lot of jobs. And I don't know if they still do this, but at the time, it seemed like every school district had their own unique proprietary system for applying to a job. You didn't
Okay.
just send them your resume; you had to go through their portal, and you had to spend 2 or 3 hours of your life basically retyping everything that was already in your resume into their portal. And then you send it off and you just never hear anything, which was so disheartening.
Yeah.
I probably did 30 or more of these
Wow.
applications. And I would have so preferred it if someone would have just called me up and been like, who do you think you are? What,
Yeah.
what business do you think you have applying for our school? But it was like being ghosted, as they say now. It's like you send it off and you never hear anything. So you don't know if you should be hopeful or if you should
Oh my
be
goodness.
just
Yeah.
considering it a lost cause. And of course, they all have that language like, please do not call, only send the applications, only use the
Right.
channels that we set up. I do
Yeah.
recall there was one school that did reach out to me, which was in Alaska. And they even had me do this little like phone interview where they had me,
Wow.
sing this interval and like, what would this rhythm sound like? And it was like almost like a pre-screen thing. And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know. At least at the time, I couldn't wrap my head around moving, from central Ohio all the
Yeah.
way to Alaska right away. So I was like,
Right.
I don't know if I want to do that. Um, so
Yeah.
I was, yeah, I basically, I took 3 years off in between undergrad and grad
Yeah.
school, and I was working day job, and I was with an ex-girlfriend, and was
Uh,
teaching lessons and taking lessons and playing in community ensembles. I kind of
okay.
just cooled it off. Things didn't really pan out super well with applying to
Right.
music jobs. Um, and so I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to work day job and kind of regroup and see what happens. And
Yeah.
so there was an experience where I had taken some grad school auditions, um, and I applied to Cleveland Institute of Music. I applied to Northwestern, and I applied to Ohio University because they had an assistantship for trumpet teaching there. I didn't get into
Right.
CIM. I didn't get into Northwestern. I got into OU, but I didn't get the assistantship. And so I was like, oh,
Uh,
geez, like this is so disheartening. I only
right.
applied because I wanted the assistantship there. And so I
Right.
was like, okay, something needs to change. I was living in Cleveland at the time. Again, playing in a lot of community groups, working day job. I had moved back home and moved back
Okay.
in with my parents. My mom got me a job at Discover Card, and I was working
Yeah.
there, and I started taking regular lessons with the guy in the Columbus Symphony named Jeff Korak. And he had
Okay.
studied with this famous trumpet teacher from the Chicago Symphony back in the day at Northwestern. And he
Okay.
really turned me around with my playing success in that
Wow.
time.
Yeah.
Because at the time, my playing was warm up and it doesn't feel good. Do a little of this, do a little of that, go on this wild goose chase. And I would just wear myself out in my warm up. And he was like, no, you're going to have a plan. You're going to commit to your plan. Don't get carried away. And if it doesn't work, just note that for the day and then adjust it the next day. But don't go on a wild goose chase right now. And he just had a consistency of approach to the trumpet that turned out really well for me. So when I applied to grad schools next year, I applied to 5 or 6 different schools. I got into them all, several with
Right.
good scholarship offers. And so he really kind of
Ah,
helped me just turn things around
yeah.
with my playing and approach things in a much more calm and
Mm.
determined fashion.
Yeah, he gave you the secret sauce.
Yeah. Yeah, he did at that time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So now you're in grad school, and before we move on, we've got a clip of you playing. Tell us a little bit about, set this up for us. Is it the National Trumpet Competition? School me on this a little bit.
Yeah, so they have this thing, NTC, that I can't remember how long it's been around for, but it's been a long time. And basically, you submit a tape, like a prelim audition tape, and then you will get accepted to the live round if it passes through. And then you go to wherever they are holding the competition, which
Mm.
luckily for me, again, I'm still a broke college student, even though I'm going to Temple University for school now. I don't have a ton of money set aside for airfare and hotels and all this stuff.
Right,
And so
right,
fortunately for me, National Trumpet Competition was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the 2 years that I was in grad school in Philadelphia.
right.
So
Okay,
that just worked out really well that I could just hop in my car and drive 2 hours and go
right.
to National Trumpet Competition. And
Yeah.
sort of similar theme here. I didn't really know what to expect about it. I kind of had a sense like this would be good for me to do. And in fact, I had done it the previous year, and me, I can't remember if my tape had made it through or not, but anyway, this was my second year doing it. And I just was going with no expectations. In fact, I didn't even pack enough clothing to perform on what would be the second day. They would have your prelim day. And I just thought, well, I'll just go and have fun. I'm
Right,
not really expecting anything. And then I happened
right.
to get through to the final round, and I was like, oh, geez, I didn't know that would happen.
Yeah,
So I,
yeah,
just had to wear my same stuff again. And then, I was
yeah.
playing the clip. And so this was from the final round in the graduate division. And this is the George Delarue trumpet concertino.
Okay. All right. Let's take a listen. All right. We're good. Here we go. All right. Yeah. Talk a little bit about, for those that are watching and audience members, some of them are not musicians. I mean, to be up there at this competition, what's going through your body, your brain, I know you've put in all this work coming into it. How does that happen?
Well, yeah, of course, there's the nervous energy that you feel, especially leading up to it. It seems like the nerves are always the worst until you hit the downbeat, and then you're just kind of in it, and you're swimming.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but I
Meet
can
you at the
recall
bottom
being up
right.
there and just, that's right, yeah. Um, I can recall just having a few key thoughts in my mind, and just they were just technical things that were
Right.
important to me at that time, and just holding on to them, just like, all right, just channel this, do this, do this, and that seemed to give my brain kind of something to do. I heard a teacher use this analogy one time with your brain when you're performing. He said, if you have small children, it can be a challenge going to the store with small children because they want to do all these things. They want to run around. And he's like, so a way you can occupy your small child is to, give them a jar of something and be like, here, hold this for us. They don't put it in the cart. They just hold it like it's their special duty for that time. And he's like, that's what you do with your brain. You give it like a special little task to do while you're performing. And for me at
Yeah.
that time, it was just holding on to this idea of getting a certain characteristic in the sound that I was going for. And that
Right.
it seemed to make some space or free up things so that I wasn't sort of paralyzed with nervous energy, I guess.
That is great. So, uh, you got third place. Is that correct in the national trumpet competition?
Yeah, that's right.
Uh,
Yeah, and it was an interesting experience for me because here's to me from my experience, here's John coming from liberal arts college with 2,000 students in the whole school, and now I'm out here in Philadelphia, and I had been craving that small fish in a big pond experience. And you look at the list of the competitors at these things and they tell you what school they come from. And there's players from really prestigious schools there. And so to even hear that I had made it, into this round, it was like a mental shift for me. I don't know. For me, it was a big moment of external validation, which I know is not the
Yes.
healthiest thing to be craving for all the time, but
No.
it was where I felt like, oh, okay, I can kind of hang with some of these cats now
Right.
in a way that
Yeah.
I didn't know or believe about myself before. And that was
Right.
sort of what led me on my journey to wanting to go to grad school anyway, was thinking like, what must they be teaching in these schools? What must these players who are at your Curtis and your Juilliards and your
Right.
Northwesterns and your Cleveland and, stuff like this, like what must they be teaching there?
Yeah.
What are the students like? What goes, I had a curiosity that couldn't be satiated. And I just felt like,
Right.
well, I have to study with a teacher like that. I felt I'm not going to be able to rest until I see like, what's going on here? What's going on with all
Yeah.
this? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it was just, for me, it was a moment of a lot of pride at the time. And, I'm really grateful to have had the experience because a lot of the other finalists are people who I'm still in touch with. One of them also has a military band job in the Army. The other, we met up in 2018 at the Stockholm Chamber Brass. These are people you're running into constantly in your career later on. It's not just, oh, these are other competitors. These are colleagues. These are people who you look up to and inspire you
Sure.
and drive you.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. So you get through there. Are you married at this point, or um, where are you going with your life there? And did this take you into thinking about other gigs? What was in your mind, in your thought process?
Right. So the competition happened in the spring of 2015. So I did my master's at Temple from 2013 to 2015. So I'm coming up to the end of my master's time.
Okay.
And I started dating my wife, girlfriend at the time, obviously, just a few months earlier, right at the tail end of 2014. And so she was graduating the same time as me, as she's a harpist. Her name's Elizabeth.
All
And
right.
she was coming to the end of her studies, and she was an usher at the Kimmel Center, which is where the Philadelphia Orchestra performs. And unlike a
Okay.
lot of cities where the ushers are volunteer staff, they actually paid their ushers there and they had benefits and things like that. So I
Wow.
wouldn't say it's a gig you'd want to try and live on, but she had
Right.
something that she was doing there.
Yeah.
And so we were calculating, well, what's our next step? What are we going to do? What's going to go on? And she thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to graduate. Maybe I'll just keep working here. And I wanted
Right.
to continue studying. And so Temple had what they call a professional studies certificate. Some schools, they have like an artist diploma or something like that. I just knew I felt like as far as my musical progress was concerned, I was on this rocket ship. I love my teacher. I felt like we got along really well. He
Right.
was just broadening my horizons and broadening my ears in ways that I
Yeah.
was so excited by. and I feel like I could taste the progress, he could taste the progress. And so I just wanted to keep that going. So I knew I wanted to keep studying. And so I did apply to to 2 other schools also, but ultimately decided to continue on at Temple. And my wife at the time, who thought she was going to just stay in the Philadelphia area working her usher job, she all of a sudden gets a call from another school to basically go do a DMA on full scholarship. And so she's like, well, I have to take that opportunity. And I was like, yeah, I think you do. You have to take that opportunity. So she moved out to Cincinnati, and I was doing this professional studies certificate for a semester. And I ended up quitting it after that first semester because for grad school, because it's a degree program, you could borrow loans to help you pay for your degree. And that's what I did. I took full advantage of that. And that freed me up, of course, from like living expenses and things like that, so that I could really buckle down on my practicing. And then, and also as a degree student, you had access to like work study jobs. So I had these cushy, easy jobs in the music library, and I would refill the printer paper and the ink in a computer lab, like really easy stuff, but that helped you pay the bills. You had a little spending money, and, your loans would take care of the big chunky stuff. So now I'm in this professional study certificate. It's not a degree program. So I'm not eligible to borrow loans, which is good because, I had enough debt at that time that I was like, well, I should stop doing that. But I also was no longer eligible for those cushy work study jobs because it wasn't a degree program. So now I'm having to find work out in town, and that started to eat up a lot more of my time. And so I could feel my musical progress really starting to level off. It wasn't as fast because I just wasn't able to focus all of my energy on that. And I thought I did a really good job doing that when I was in grad school. I was pretty singularly focused on getting my practice in and making that my priority. And life circumstances sort of got in the way in the middle of that professional study certificate. And I could tell, my teacher could tell. And so I kind of came to a decision in the holiday break after that semester of like, I need 2 things. I need more practice time, and I need more money. And I can get both of those if I quit school. If I drop out of school, I'll just work more so I can have the money to pay bills, but then I won't have the school requirements. I felt like, not like I couldn't get any more out of school, but at the time I've tasted what the orchestra feels and sounds like. I've tasted what the wind ensemble feels and tastes like. Okay, I've worked with my teacher for a few years now. We've had a really good experience. I feel like I've got enough to go practice on. So I'm just going to work, and I'm going to practice, and I'm going to leave the school element behind. And I started teaching at an El Sistema style program called Play on Philly, which is run by a really impressive guy named Stanford Thompson, who founded it. And I think he might be a year younger than me. And here's a guy who has founded this El Sistema program in Philly with a few locations, and it's got a lot of students in it, and it's helping now basically kids that don't have access to music programs in their schools.
Right on.
And so I started doing that, and that kind of sustained me until I eventually moved out to Cincinnati area to be with my wife, who was already doing her DMA work.
Great. I believe I see a harp behind you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it worked out that I had some nice decoration for the podcast today. Yeah.
Yeah. That is great. Well, God bless her. That's super. Does she play out in Washington there now, or she still?
Yeah, she does. She actually just won the audition for the Symphony Tacoma job. And she plays with a ton of the regional orchestras out here, and plays with Seattle whenever they call. And she's even got a few calls to go down into Oregon and California a few times. So she's done well to carve out a niche for herself out here on the West Coast.
It seems like harp is like oboe and bassoon and even French horn. There's a lot less of them than it is for trumpet, especially sax. So.
Yeah. That's well, and then to your point, I had never, my undergrad didn't have harpists at it. So I had never even encountered a harp or a harpist until I went to grad school. And, when we met up.
Right. That's great. So what made you think about the Navy? Where did that road come into your life?
So basically, I'm coming to the end of my graduate studies, and I'm on a couple of websites like Musical Chairs and Last Row Music. These are places that are like, they're like classified ads for music performing jobs. And I was basically taking any audition I could get my hands on. And I mean, I have to admit that I really didn't know a lot about music in the armed forces. I was aware that there were bands and that they were in DC. I didn't know that there were all these regional bands and there's reserve bands. And I didn't know the level of it. So I was basically just going to that website, and if I could drive to it or if I could get to it easily enough, I was going to take that audition and just see what. So I was casting a very wide net. And I guess I've left out a chapter, I guess, which is, reconnecting with my wife in Cincinnati. I went on for more study at Miami of Ohio University. So that was 16 to 18. And so the whole time I'm taking auditions and I'm looking for playing opportunities. And I see this audition for the Navy Fleet Bands pop up in one of these. And I was like, okay, well, I'm in Cincinnati. That's in Memphis, Tennessee. Well, it's like 7-hour drive or something like that. I could do that. And so I had my final concert of my studies at Miami University at like whatever. Maybe we end the concert at 10 o'clock or something like that. I live an hour away, so I get home at 11. I maybe sleep until 2 a.m. or something like that. I wake up, I hit the road because I'm supposed to be checked in at this audition the next day by 11 or noon or something like that. And I can recall having to pull over. I was so exhausted a few times, but yeah, just got there. It took the audition and it just happened to work my way that day. And luckily that's the way it is, because I'm sure from what Jared's told you that just the circumstances of music making in the Navy regional program is different than in the other branches. I wasn't aware of that. So it was fortunate that I just happened to see that audition and it worked out the way that it did.
That is great. That's great. So tell the audience a little bit about your career in the Navy, and where have you been playing, and how has it been going, and what is the future for you?
Yeah, it's been good. I've been in about 5 years. It'll be 6 in November. And my first duty station was in Jacksonville, Florida. And I moved down there, and you do a lot of bugling down there. They have a national cemetery there. So I feel like it seemed like once or more every week I was going out to that cemetery and playing tap or several funeral ceremonies. But I went into the sort of New Orleans style brass band down there. And so uniquely prepared for this job, because this job, you can do brass quintet, you can do wind ensemble, but they also have rock band, or what they call popular music group, PMG. And then they've got brass band, which is like a New Orleans style thing, but they might do stuff like young blood brass or charty things instead of just kind of free things. And because I had done jazz band in high school, I was in Columbus Youth Jazz Orchestra, because I did big band all the way through my undergrad and did a little freelancing subbing with like wedding big bands and stuff like that. I came into the program, and I think people sort of thought, well, he's been doing classical music for the last 10 years, because that's really what my graduate studies was concentrated on. And so, and that is true. Like that's definitely more of my forte now, but I was able to access, that experience that I had put in there so long ago. And it's really come to help me out, because I felt like, okay, I can kind of go between these different ensembles, which they expect, and you get reassigned to the different groups, every so often. So you get put in the brass band, you get put in the brass band. And I felt like, wow, I'm kind of set up for this. I have this experience that's kind of commercial jazz and also this classical thing. So this is kind of good. Whereas if you've just been doing classical the whole time, it might be hard to add comfort with improvisation or comfort with, just playing different styles into your thing when you do get. So yeah, Jacksonville was a good experience. My wife's from Florida, so she knows what the vibe's all about. She knows everything about that. And of course the pandemic happened while we were down there. So I had a lot of time off work, and I can remember feeling very grateful that I had gotten this job, because of course our paychecks kept coming in. Whereas all my other friends who I went to grad school with, who are private teachers, or they're just teachers in general, or they're performers as a living, they're not doing anything. Their organizations aren't at work. There's no audiences. Is really, as a bleak time. And so it was like, I felt like we had just slid into home plate right at the last second, like, woo, because I got to Jacksonville in May of 2019, and it was a little less than a year later that the pandemic started shutting everything down. So that was just kind of like a wild experience to have happen, where you get into this military thing and then the pandemic hits, and oh geez, all right, well, at least financially we're able to take care of ourselves during this time. So that worked out really nice. And then we've moved out to Washington. This is our second duty station, and have been, again, doing the brass quintet thing. Now I'm in the brass band, and we've been on tour recently up in Alaska and in Spokane, and it's been a lot of fun, especially working with, folks like Jared. He's so much fun. When you encounter musicians like that who come from a different background, are just able to blow your mind with some of the things that they can do. That's a fun thing that you don't get that when you're going through grad school and you're studying orchestral trumpet or something like that. And then you come in and you meet a drum set player who can just rip, or you meet a guitar player who can play these note perfect solos from classic albums that you know and love.
That is great. I mean, what a path. You've been really blessed. And what do you see your future? Are you going to do 20 years in, or do you plan on trying, or are you just, pardon the pun, playing it by ear?
Definitely the latter. Definitely playing it by ear, especially with my wife being a professional musician. It's one of those things where the military lifestyle has definitely presented some challenges for us in terms of, she, by the time we were ready to leave Jacksonville, she had carved out a good niche for herself in Jacksonville. And then it was like, okay, time to move, time to go on to this next thing. And so, we've been building this life together. We didn't know that she was going to get that offer to go to Cincinnati. And we did that. We did the long distance thing to make it through that. And then we regrouped, and then I went out to Cincinnati, and now here's the Navy thing. And so we're kind of just taking step after step after step and seeing what happens. So yeah, your guess is as good as mine.
There you go. God bless you. One thing we've learned as parents of a Navy kid is flexibility. And you just have to be able to go with the flow. And that's great. Well, I'm so glad that you took time out of your touring and everything else to take time to sit down and share your journey with us, John. I really appreciate it so much, and I wish you nothing but the best for you and your wonderful wife there, to keep playing all the right notes and enjoying music. Before we leave, can you talk to our audience? It's made up of, everybody from kids to 90-year-old players. Why should we continue to play music? What does it mean to you and your wife and your being and your soul? Tell us a little bit about that in your life.
Well, to me, music offers such a wonderful challenge for self-development. That's the thing that resonates the most with me. You sit down and you're learning a piece of music, and you're not just learning the notes, you're learning about expression, which is connecting with other human beings. You're learning about the history of the music. You're learning about the life events that shaped that composer's life. So you could be playing, someone who had to escape the Holocaust. You're playing their music. That means something different from someone who was brought up on the streets of New Orleans, and you're playing that kind of music. You're learning not just notes and rhythms. You're learning about the world. You're learning about history. You're learning about politics, and music is a wonderful vehicle for accessing that. You might not ever encounter that unless you go looking for it in your day-to-day life, and music sort of brings that to you naturally. You have this great opportunity to learn about so many things, and music it's scientific, but it's also not scientific. It's an art and it's a craft, and you can get really analytical with it, or you can be very philosophical with it. There's a lot of ways to try it on. And, especially for students, or people playing in community groups, we have all these buzzwords about teamwork, community, things like this. If you're a musician and you have the opportunities to play in school band or community band, or to make music at your church, that's something that you because you've lived it. It's not something that someone told you. It's you've felt it in your soul of what it means to tune and blend with someone else and to make something special that connects with an audience. It's something that you've lived as an experience. And I think that's a powerful thing that can sustain anyone, whether you're professional, you're not a professional. It's just
Right.
having that opportunity to connect, develop yourself,
Yeah.
and offer something to the community.
Yeah. Right on. That's offer a part of your soul that, and I love the way you say connect with the audience, and we're glad you got a chance to come and connect with us, and we appreciate you taking the time, and we give you all our best, and thank you so much for serving and bringing us the music to your audiences around the world. So keep doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be on here. I've enjoyed the other interviews I've seen you do, and it's been a pleasure working with Jared. I just have to throw in there, like, what an inspiration to hear him all the time and every day on these performances. He's a showman, but he's a great player as well. And he's just a lot of fun. We've had a lot of fun connecting about music and music learning and, trying to wrangle these instruments that we're trying to master. And yeah, it's been been a lot of fun.
All right, slap them upside the head for me. We love them. God bless you, and we'll be seeing you soon. We want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching the podcast. You can find the podcast, obviously, at any of your venues and on YouTube. And we want to thank you for taking time out of your life to listen. So go on out there and play all the right notes.
You've been listening to The Podium. If you would like to be a guest on The Podium, email the show at onthe2@gmail.com. That's ONTHEPODIUMTOO @gmail.com.